everybody. Welcome to AI in the Publishing Supply Chain, smarter, faster, built for what's next. We're very excited to have Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of BISG, and Mark Hispa in conversation today. I just want to offer a couple of quick housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded. If you do have to drop off early for any reason, we'll make sure that that recording gets out to everyone that registered. So please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A as they come up organically. And we do have time set aside at the end of the session to answer those. So please feel free to drop those in as they occur to you. Our speaker, Mark Hispa, has generously agreed to share his slide deck. So don't worry too much about taking notes. We'll make sure that that's included with the materials that are distributed to everyone a few days after we finish the session and do all of the polishing work. And without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off. So I'm going to end that poll and display the results for folks. So thanks to everyone that chimed in for that. We could see that by far the most common point of engagement is that folks are trying AI tools occasionally, but not in regular workflows. That's 67% of responders.
It is interesting that 20% of the respondents, so 7 of the 33, see it as part of their weekly tasks or project management or built into core workflows. So that emulates pretty closely with what we were seeing in the survey that you oversaw last summer.
Yes, that's correct. We had about 550 responses to that industry survey. We're still working through that data, partnering with BookNet Canada on a white paper for that. So we should have some news on that after our next working group meeting in December. So excited for that. So let's go ahead and get into it. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Hispa, who leads the AI and data-driven products practice at BearingPoint. Under his leadership, BearingPoint has published to market data-driven tech innovation. He's notably publicized demand and sales forecasting tools for press and book publishing industries. The tool DemandSens.book is now supporting distribution processes for 160 plus book publishers and 10K new books per year. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to see your presentation. And then after that presentation and demo, hear you in conversation with Brian O'Leary. So happy to hand things over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Baruch, and thank you, Brian, for having me today. And hello to everyone. To be honest, I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation with all of you about something which is actually I'm deeply passionate about, how artificial intelligence can truly transform publishing. As you said, Brooke, in really few words, and as you mentioned, so I'm Mark, I'm partner at BearingPoint, and then I will elaborate a little bit about what is BearingPoint for those who don't know us. I'm based in Paris, France, and actually I'm the founder of DemandSens. BearingPoint in very few words. So DemandSens was born within BearingPoint 4 years ago, and it's now a well-established software addressing specifically AI planning, forecasting challenges, and all of this in the publishing book industry, but also press publishing with a similar product that we are also deploying in Europe for most of the leading press publishers. At BearingPoint, we are a professional services firm. We worked actually into 24 countries with more than 6,000 colleagues worldwide, including the US, and with a unique ecosystem of consulting, software, and ventures. So this is clearly meaning that we can bring to publishing not just cutting-edge AI technology, but also the robustness and the trust publishers can expect from the long-established partners. So before getting the conversation with you, Brian, let me introduce a little bit about what actually we do at DemandSens. So you know this better than anyone, but getting the right book in the right place, in the right quantity, and also at the right time is still an enormous challenge. So here, from my perspective, the underlying rationale why publishing needs a new approach for supply chain, embedding data and AI. for the demand, pre-orders, Amazon surges, BookTok spikes. All these demand swings are faster and harder to predict. For back orders, service failures trigger rush freight, POD overcost, and retailer cancellation. Sourcing cost, lead time, and inflation makes each print run riskier and more capital intensive. Regarding the returns, they look like unpredictable for most publishers and they distort true net demand. For inventory misalignment, there are too much capital that sits idle in slow-moving titles, while fast movers still miss windows. And data, there is clearly a lack of unified visibility that slows reaction time and weakens the decision's quality. So at DemandSens, we aim at addressing those stay-awake issues of the book publishing industry with the help of AI, data science, and data. What you can see here into these slides are actually the key use cases, among the key use cases that we are now focusing on with DemandSens. And I've just highlighted the ones that are dealing directly with the core of our discussions today, so the critical decision-making impacting supply chain effectiveness. So that can be strengthening stock allocation planning, or sales forecasting at different time horizon, or even optimizing print run, including the reprint alerting system. Our conviction is very clear. AI should be an accelerator, not a replacement. It just automates and strengthens the repetitive or time-consuming or complex tasks. It therefore reduces drastically the level of risk by embracing all data available and extracting signals that makes your decisions even more reliable. I don't want to emphasize that much, but just to let you know, here's some KPIs, some metrics that we have already measured in Europe with some of our customers, and here some verbatims from from some leaders that are already using at scale the solution here in France and in Germany typically. To be very concrete, which is actually the ambition of this webinar, I wanted to also highlight and to illustrate how AI can be actually embedded. And let's start first with this use case illustration. What you can see here, and I will show you just afterward actually the way it works, but this is something that we have done in Germany with a player named Media Control. I guess that most of you don't know Media Control. To make it very simple, this is actually the strict equivalent of Circana in the US. So they are the sole market data provider in Germany. And we came to the conclusion that the market was expecting and searching for enriched services, purely data-driven services. And so we built up a partnership for the next 6 years, aiming at delivering progressively services, starting first with a critical and pretty challenging services, which has been rolled out and officially open this year, and which is aiming at providing for every single ISBN expected to be released in a near or midterm future. So we are talking here about the front list. So the solution is providing off the shelf for every single ISBN which is going to be available in the German market. It just provides a sales estimate over the first 3 weeks the first 6 weeks and the first 12 weeks? So this is a pretty challenging question when you ask this to any kind of system. And we try to find a way to build up what we could call a data pipeline, which gonna collect and get access to the raw data, and those data is gonna be actually the let's say the book master data describing the content as precisely as possible, but also the sales data, of course. Here we are talking naturally about the sellout data that we collect day by day for every single ISBN and region by region. And mixing all of that and enrich with open data, we came to a certain level of quality, allowing us, after testing and validation with publishers, that the forecasting engine was truly bringing on the table a new level of understanding and forecasting tool to those market players. And quite quickly, we also came to the conclusion, and what you can see here is an illustration, and I can directly show you here. Actually, as a publisher, I can get access just like you do into Circana platform, and you can here, as a German publisher, you can get access to the media control platform. You can search for any ISBN, and then you can ask the system to provide you with its own estimate and forecast. And this is actually what you can see here. All of these are dummy data, right? So there is absolutely no confidential or whatever. This is just for the sake of this demonstration. So what you could ask for from a system is to provide you those numbers. But quite quickly, we also came to the conclusion that as a user, as a publisher, I need to understand what are the underlying rationale, and not just a figure, and not just even a level of confidence. I also need to understand why the system has recommended such a level of quantity. And notably in the cases where you could have publishers who don't agree with the forecast, they need also to understand if the data and why the engine has figured out such volume. And so in that perspective, we are providing typically here for every single forecast, the system is actually leveraging a little bit more than 200 variables, which are built specifically for this engine. And for every single forecast, every single ISBN, the system will highlight and put on top the most influencing parameters, variables that have driven the forecast, the outcome. So if you take another book, that's going to be possibly other influencing parameters, and it really provide a first level of understanding about why this is so high or so low. We also provide to the publisher an aggregated understanding. We can call this a data quality score or data sanity score. And to make it very simple and straightforward, this is a good way to understand if the data is complete enough into the historical data set. And secondly, if the volatility is not too high when we look specifically to the set of book title, which are supposed to be more or less similar to the ones that we are trying to forecast. So both consideration in terms of completeness and also volatility. So the less data you have, the more complex it's going to be, and the more volatile the signal is, and the harder it's going to be in terms of forecast. We also provide, and now this is even much more developed and structured. Here, this is just a demo, but in production, We have also emphasized, with the help of LLM and tools just like ChatGPT, as you know, but here this is not ChatGPT, but we submit all the parameters to an LLM, and then it formulates in a very concrete way. It explains to the users what's happening, and again, the rationale of promoting or recommending such a quantity. And we also remind to the users typically the previous performance of the author. And actually, it was quite obvious from our perspective, but we also realized that most of the time the users were maybe just forgetting some information amongst their historical data set, and by just reminding the data that the system has made available, it also helped to understand some drivers about the forecast. And we also highlight here, typically this is the comps, and I will certainly come back on that later on, but into the system we have built up a comps engine, which is automatically detecting and crawling across all the portfolio available in German language and published in Germany. We highlight and figure out what are the most similar, the most comparable items that would be worth to take into consideration into the forecast. So, and just to wrap up on this, the forecast is not just relying on these comps, but we consider that without the comps, it's less accurate. So we leverage and use them in a proper way. And we also use something like 200 variables, which are derived information from all the historical data attached to typically the level of price, the different formats, the collections, the publishers and authors, KPIs. And mixing all of these inputs help us to actually have a pretty robust engine, and again capable in every single situation to recommend a quantity for different time horizon, and actually provide some visibility for publishers. In a second stage, we have also, as long as the books is published, the engine every single day will revise the forecast so that it will take into account the actual numbers. So if there is an acceleration, or if the figures are actually possibly a little bit below the ambition, then the system is every day, as long as you connect in the morning, the forecasts are adapted and adjusted with the figures that has been ingested overnight. So in Germany, there is a refresh rate on a daily basis. As far as I understood, in the US, this is more like a weekly basis, but this very high level rate of refresh helps to really have an up-to-date forecast, considering the latest data available. If I come back to this, I also thought about sharing with you, just highlighting, this is actually here a demo environment. So what I was showing to you is a dedicated service with our partner, Media Control in Germany. Here, this is our solution. This is DemandSens. There are different modules, as I was mentioning, specifically regarding the print run. Actually, you can select a specific catalog, and the system will provide you the upcoming. So here, this is a module specifically dealing with optimizing the print run decision for the front list catalog. So the book is not yet published, and the question that as a publisher you need to tackle is how many I should go for. And even if you have to take decision month in advance, just because possibly you would print, typically in Europe, many publishers leverage Asian capabilities, capacities. So they need to decide something like 6 or even more month in advance. So the system will provide estimate. And so here you can retrieve, I won't go into too much detail, but I would be delighted to have more detailed demo if needed later on. And typically here the system will recommend some quantities. So here this is really in advance without any sales target, any discussion between the publishers and the distributors. But at some stage, when the publishers and the distributors meet and agree on a certain level of ambition, then there is also a refresh. And all of this, you can also here access to, possibly you can ask to select some comps, and the system will automatically also, here you have the different comps proposed by the systems. So you can then access to the, so you can directly get access to the system of the figures of a specific comps that has been automatically detected. And when you, on a specific ISBN, then you can also visualize not only the print run, but just like you've seen of what we have done in Germany, we are currently also enriching and providing the maximum level of additional information. So the publisher will feel more comfortable with the right level of understanding about why these recommended quantities should be good enough and pretty robust, and then support the decisions. So here you have some typically the comps that the system has promoted, but as a user, you can say, I don't agree, or this one is pretty good. And I can also, as a publisher, I can decide to say, okay, this one, and I can add an additional one. I would suggest to the system to take them into consideration, right? So again, this highlight the fact that we don't pretend that the machine could completely replace and fully automate any kind of processes, but this is really a complementary approach where we leverage and use this kind of technology just to support the right level of expertise managed by the operational teams. In really few words, what I just tried to mention here is why should we consider strengthening the supply chain with AI? And actually, what you would need, what you would expect from a solution that would tackle those challenges. From my perspective, if you go for such a solution like DemandSens or any others, you should expect that the solution would embed and leverage, let's say, the state of the art in terms of AI. That could be machine learning, that could be LLM or whatever. So you just get rid of this burden task to constantly, benchmark and compare and enrich your technological stack. So this solution should bring on the table those capabilities, and they should contribute directly to the bottom line. They should support the decision making. So in terms of use cases and impact, they should focus on sizing properly the print run and help you to find the right balance in terms of back orders and return risk, right? Also, not just about the bottom line, but that should help you to drive the top line and to move faster, to better anticipate and to capture every opportunities, meaning you should anticipate purchase order and avoid, when relevant, as much as possible, the possible back orders. And at the end of the day, it means that leveraging such kind of solution needs to truly empower the data-driven decision, just to go beyond the guesswork, the expertise, which will be forever absolutely necessary, mandatory, but to go beyond this, to have also this capability to support all of that with a data-driven decision and to, make this available across your entire organization to make better, but also faster decision. So that was a little bit for my introduction, I guess. And correct me, Brooke, I hope I wasn't too long.
No, we very much
Yeah.
appreciated the level of detail and the granularity in your presentation. Thank you. I'd like to invite Brian to pull out some of those ideas a little bit further in conversation. I know that we wanted to specifically talk a little bit about some of the supply chain applications in a little bit more detail.
I guess you're on mute, Brian.
Yep.
Hi.
Sure. I did want to start that, and I appreciate the notion to move faster. You were unable to attend in the spring, but our annual meeting was actually themed "Move Fast and Fix Things." So it's very much in the spirit, I think, of what you've been describing this afternoon. I wanted to drill down in 4 areas, if we could, in sequence. One is on demand forecasting. A second might be print run optimization. You've touched upon some of those in your demonstrations to date. I also wanted to talk about returns and returns management and purchase order fulfillment. But maybe we start with demand forecasting. How should a publisher or a partner, if you're working with them, think about making this work? What kinds of things you need to take into account to make it work for you?
Yeah, yeah. I have some content, and as you say, Brooke, all of this content will be kindly shared just after the session. And yeah, from my perspective, and this is clearly what I was highlighting with what we do at DemandSens, but unlike also other solutions available on the market. But from my perspective, the level of maturity of those technologies so far clearly helps and are now efficient to anticipate the purchase order even before they arrive, so that you will anticipate the different waves. You can then take action and take better decision by optimizing your print run decision. So here it's not just about I'm gonna tell you you should sell this quantity and that's it. With the right level of granularity of data as an input and that the publisher owns, then you will have this um, level of breakdown of granularity. So by monitoring and ingesting really frequently the core data feeding the system, then it's going to help you to have on the short run this identification or highlighting of what should be the next wave, where the PO should come from, how big they should be. And typically on the bottom, on the bottom of this slide, on the right bottom, um, this is typically a kind of highlight that a solution can provide you on a very operational basis. So that should be capable to tell you that when, from where something should arrive, so you could better anticipate that as long as you consider that this kind of PO should be fulfilled. And this is another topic that we're highlighting. We have the feeling that it's not necessarily so systematically, fulfill every single demand, as long as you want also to protect the bottom line and consciously deal with the return risk.
And I imagine that this evolves over time. So an approach that allows you to identify an anticipated surge in demand. It's got to be tested back. So if that search doesn't surface, then the next time through, or for other books, the system will understand that it missed something or that it interpreted the signal incorrectly. Is that
Exactly.
fair? That's fair?
Exactly. And actually, the way it's going to work is every single system that's going to have a training phase and then the validation, calibration, validation of the engine. So as long as you provide as an input all of this granular information, the system will be capable to detect the significant patterns. And that's going to help you to, as long as you enter a quite similar situation, configuration, then the system will pop up an alert and just prevent you and just warn you that something should happen considering what has recently happened. But also, as you said, the system needs and is constantly retrained. So if for some reason there were specific patterns occurring, but which is now no longer meaningful, then the system will learn about that, will recalibrate, and will reconsider what he would have said just because he's now observing that in such condition, then the probability of getting such a kind of PO is getting now much lower. So he won't highlight or he won't alert you about something that should happen. So there is, as you said, but this is also true in every single type of AI system. There is not a one size fits all and forever. So constantly you need to um, adapt to retrain and to be sure that the system available and up and running is relying on the most available, the most granular information available.
Yeah. And I imagine that that's part of the thinking behind your data quality score. I saw that
Yeah.
it measures both completeness and variability. So,
Yeah.
you're trying to give the user a sense of, is this a good estimate or is this a little bit softer?
Yeah, and actually this one was has been useful in some specific situation where typically you could have a completely new author, absolutely unknown, because typically in the system, when the when someone is has never published, we compute and kind what we call a popularity index score between 0 and 100. So we crawl the internet and we look for what this author means actually, not necessarily relying on previous publication, previous books, but just is that someone popular? Is that an influencer? Is that a political personality or whatever? And but sometimes you have someone which is absolutely unknown with a low level of popularity. You have maybe this is a format or a price which is a little bit different in a new collection. And if you have very low information, then the system is getting less comfortable naturally. So with this data sanity score, we also wanted just to explain a little bit that potentially in some configuration, if you get less input, then the output should be actually with a less level, with a lower level of confidence. So this is also a way to explain a little bit. There is no magic into all of this, right? So um, if the system is not capable to rely on data, if the foundation of the forecast are pretty weak, then we need to explain this for the end user. So there is no misunderstanding. You won't have the feeling that the system is completely crazy or just forecasting randomly something. There is always a very strong, very good rationale. And this is actually what needs to be displayed.
Well, thank you for that. And maybe I could switch gears a little bit. We can talk about print run optimization, because certainly figuring out how many you might sell is one thing, but you also have to have the copies in hand at the right time and in the right place.
Yeah,
So I think you've given some thought to this as well.
yeah. From my perspective here, technologies such as, let's say, AI, globally speaking, should definitely help to move from what was maybe a little bit less in the US, I can say, but I can tell you that in Europe, most of the players are rather considering going for one large initial print run. In some situation, this is absolutely necessary, right? If you print in China, then it's very complex to reprint, and there are good reasons, but there are also many situations where you can have multiple smaller print run. And in those scenarios, then you need a system that's going to support and help you on a daily basis to figure out and to monitor properly, depending on the sell out and sell in data, that gonna automatically pop out the situation where you would possibly need to take a decision. And it needs to provide you with some scenarios, alternative scenarios. Just there is never one single scenario which has to be followed. There are multiple options, and then it depends on the human expert to decide what would be the best option in this situation right now. But the system has to consider many options, and it has to tell you, it has to recommend when you should possibly take an action. It has to recommend how many you should go for, considering a specific technology. And typically the situation could be, I'm talking typically specifically about the reprint decision. So the system should be capable to tell you, it's now you should go for this technology, so you should go for an offset typically right now, because there is a lead time of such numbers of weeks, considering the unit cost and considering the estimated and anticipated demand evolution. That means you should go for these quantities and this budget. But alternatively, you could wait a little bit, wait for actual data, and then possibly in 2 or 3 weeks, there is an alternative option with a little bit less level of risk, a little bit more expensive, just because you could leverage an alternative technology such as POD, and the system needs to assist you into this direction. And also the system I didn't mention, but this is what I was showing into the solution, into DemandSens. The system can help into the reprint process, but also, which was not that obvious at the very beginning, helps when you have very, very little information, no signal from the market. You just have the information that you have about the books. And as precisely as you can describe it, then the system is also capable to say, well, with this classification, with all of those keywords, this description, this summary that you can feed, considering the historical data from this author and etc., it looks like, based on the data, you should go for this quantity. And here's the system. I didn't show this into the solution, but again, there is not a single value which is which is a perfect one. Here, as a parameter also into DemandSens, you would say, as a publisher, I would like to secure 3 months, 6 months, or I don't know what period, when deciding for the print run. So the system will automatically consider how long you ideally would like to be secured in terms of printed quantities. So depending on that, the system will adjust and provide more or less quantity and suggest something that should be pretty robust. The only thing missing, and this is where now the publishers using DemandSens are focusing, is that amongst the catalog, you have many new books, and statistically speaking, the AI system can truly support and provide very, very robust estimate. And then you have always the very tricky ones, right? There are not that many across the new books, but then on those ones, maybe for some good reasons, and because you plan to do something very specific, you have a specific communication or media plan. Then on those one, you may disagree with the system. And this is exactly where I was pointing out that the system is supporting and complementary with the human expert. And in some situation, it's completely normal and yeah, completely normal that you would go a little bit above, or usually this is above a certain quantity recommended by the system, just because you know that something's going to happen. And if the system has not been aware about this, then it's fine to say, okay, in that condition, I will go for a little bit more. But actually, yeah, print run from our perspective can be definitely supported by systems such as the DemandSens or others.
I want to make sure that we allow you an adequate amount of time for questions. So maybe we can move through the next couple of questions quickly.
Yeah.
One was on returns management. How do you think about returns management in an AI sense?
Yeah. For my usually returns are considered as a kind of a surprise or really tricky to predict or whatever. But if you look into details, the return rate, the return probability can be on every single cases can be predicted, you know, with a certain level of accuracy. But at the end, you can have an estimate way before it happens about the probability and the level of returns. And it needs, in that case, to be properly handled. And typically, it's going to help you to avoid to have some reprint decision if you have an expected returns, pretty high expected typically, and you know that they're going to be a big box reset, or that you can see that there is a velocity drop off, or you observe that there are some, you know, in terms of season or media campaign, some impact, then you could say, okay, something's going to happen right now. I know there's going to be a reprint, so it should help me to not go for an additional reprint typically. So, and anticipating the returns should definitely be part of the type of activities or tasks that you can ask a system to go for on an automatically basis and actually on a daily basis.
And then finally, when we drill down a little bit on purchase order fulfillment, how does
Yeah.
the approach that you've taken here, fit
Yeah.
with what publishers do?
Yeah, here my feeling would be to say that um, there is always this tricky trade-off, right? When you have to deal and to cope with some back order situation, and but also if you want to fulfill everything, then you have also the risk to get higher future returns, right? So there is here the question of optimizing in the right way what we could call as a short shipping strategy. So here there is the system could help in terms of considering the different, on one hand, sourcing cost or cost of operation, but on the other hand, also the cost to serve, but on the other hand, the opportunity. Also find the right balance and possibly recommend what would be the right short shipping that would prevent in a way and protect in a way your client satisfaction, even if the service level won't be as high as expected. But on the other hand, would also protect you uh, to impact too much your bottom line in case you would have some higher returns than expected. So here, my 2 cents would be to say that also this kind of system should assist you in terms of figuring out the right way to balance your decisions, considering that fulfilling a zero backorder strategy would certainly be too risky or too expensive. So here there is a tricky trade-off to handle.
I know that you have a set of takeaways that you wanted to touch
Yeah,
upon. Do you want to do that now, or do you want
yeah,
to
yeah, maybe.
why
Yeah,
don't we do that, and then we'll turn it over to questions from that Brooke has been managing.
maybe I
We
can
have a
just
few questions lined up, but
yeah.
we have time to go through key takeaways.
Okay, okay. Yeah, here in a very in a nutshell, but in a such purchase order driven market, it's all about being ready when you're gonna get those orders coming in. So, and very specifically in that perspective, machine learning techniques are pretty mature now to support this kind of use cases. Also, AI will definitely help to size this kind of bets that you need to take anytime you have a new items into your portfolio, and you need to decide whether or not you're going to go for it, and what would be the right technology, and considering the unitary cost, then to know when and how many you should go for. And again, honestly, um, AI should help as long as you have the right set of data available. And was just like I was saying, um, definitely returns as long as you consider that they are predictable, um, then that's gonna bring you to another level in terms of inventory planning. So as long as you know, and that might depend also on your capability to, reintegrate into your inventory those returns.
Right.
I know that in Europe there are some consideration. Not every single type of books can be or in a certain proportion, but more and more books are reintegrated and are redistributed, resold. And so as long as this is becoming useful parameters into your overall um, balance or equilibrium, economical balance, then you should ask a system to support you. And then, yeah, the back orders, yeah, AI can definitely support you in terms of quantifying the trade-off between short shipping now or possibly triggering higher returns later. So that was in a nutshell what we just discussed, and specifically in terms of supply chain slash AI for books. So
Well, thank you for that. And I know, Brooke, you've already received several questions from those attending. Why don't we
We
start
have.
with those and see what we can do?
yeah,
Thank you so much, Mark. I especially appreciate your note that it's not magic at the bottom of your slide. It's shared
yeah,
visibility to inform faster decisions. Our first audience question notes that publishers don't promote marketing, PR, etc., every title equally, nor does every title get the same level of public-facing attention. Does the AI system include those kinds of variables?
yeah. So here we're talking about the promotion and marketing effort, right? And the marketing budget spent for communicating about them. This is actually maybe I can maybe this one can be here. This is just a slide that this is this is an ideal world, right? So this is if everything was possible, the type of data that you would look for, collect, aggregate, and ingest as part of an input for your recommendation system. Typically, actually in Europe, that is the case in France, in Germany, or in the UK. The marketing strategy, which are here, in the bottom, um, ideally that should be part of the input, because this has clearly an impact, and this is typically where the system where there is something big happening, typically on TV or even on social networks, and if the system is not aware about this, Of course, the system is looking and crawling and searching for information that has potentially just happened. But if you plan now, typically a print run for a front list item that should be released in 1 month, and you know that there is going to be broadcasted on TV and radio, but you don't tell the system, there is here a missing part of the puzzle. So as long as the data is available, the system will use it, of course. The issue that we frequently face is that this is one of the rare data which is not structured with the rest of the data. It's usually embedded in tons of Excel sheets, not necessarily in the product information management system, right, with the rest of the data. And so there is sometimes this just kind of operational issue of grabbing the data and put it in the right place for the system. So of course, if this data luckily is available, then it needs to be made available to the system, but also not just for the future, right? Because the system, just as a reminder, is, as we said, is trained and has learned, detected patterns, etc., from the past, from a recent past. But it means that if you want tomorrow your system to say, okay, I will look at every single data available, including the marketing one, and you want the system to take into account this marketing plan, it means that in the past, you have also fed your system with all the marketing plan and spend that you have done for your backlist, right? So as long he has been capable to train, to detect everything, then he's in a better position in the future. But if you just tell him, okay, I'm going to tell you in the future, but he doesn't have this information in the past, he will just say, okay, you're telling me he's going to be broadcasted and you have 20K for promoting this book. Maybe he won't understand what you're saying. So, but yeah, this is ideally what this type of information that should be useful. Possibly, with a what if scenario. What could be also, if I was a publisher, I would love to have a system capable to tell me, playing with a kind of cursor and to say, depending on the budget, I would be able or capable to put on the table, what would be the impact, right? What would be the sensitivity of the system? If I put twice the budget, is that going to have an impact of 1.5 or 1.1, right? So this is also something that could be considered as a feature, as something really concrete and useful when times come to take a decision.
Well, we do have a few more questions, and I want to make sure that we have time to at least touch on as many of them as possible. So our next audience question asks if you can say more about the optimization algorithm. How and from what inputs does it calculate an optimal print run specifically?
Yeah. So here there is maybe I can use that one typically. Typically for the print run, as I was saying, there is, and to make it simple, but I would be delighted to get into more details. But in a nutshell, what you have to keep in mind is that on one hand, we are computing something like a little bit more 200 parameters, which can be derived variables coming from historical data. That could be, as an example, we want to have the average sales from this collection at this level of price, or in this format, and possibly from this author. But we are combining the different parameters and looking at what does it mean in terms of averages, in terms of increase rate, in terms of volatility. And combining everything, then the system is capable to say, okay, in this format, and typically on the right hand, this is just a short list, but the actual list is more like this one. But you combine everything and you have all of these very quantitative data about the sales pattern, depending on format, book, price, classification too, right? So you have some BISG or even big or thema codes. And also what we do is we, as long as it is available, but the summary that can be a few pages of the book, it's really useful to at least the bottom line is that we want to describe as precisely as possible the book itself, right? So if we have some few pages or some summary, then we can extract keywords and make sure that we're going to build up what is the second pillar of the forecast. So I was mentioning all of those 200 parameters, and on top of that, the system is crawling. Here, typically, this is an illustration. In the middle, you have the book that we are trying to forecast. And around this book, you have millions of available book which has been published in the past, right? And they also have tons of characteristics. Maybe not all of them are available. Maybe you have some missing data, and naturally, no problem. But here, what we have put in place is really like a recommendation engine where we are computing a similarity distance between the books, the book that we are looking for, that we are trying to forecast, and all the rest of the existing portfolio into your market. So possibly there would have several millions available book published in the past, and we will compute all the distance and to, at the end, only select the one with above a certain threshold, which will be considered as pretty robust comps. And then we are weighting the contribution of those comps depending on the proximity of the similarity with the books that we are analyzing. And put together, the system is saying, okay, this given classification, level of price, format from this publisher is going into this direction. We have also all of those books which looks like more or less really comparable, and we know the result. We know how many copies were sold, and it is mixing all of this to say at the end, there is a pretty good chance that you should be at this level, right? And depending on the print run criteria that you are looking for, if you want to secure 3 months, 12 months, or even 2 years of activity, then you will put more or less paper, more or less copies, so you should be secure over that period.
Great. Can this platform provide anticipated sales data for audiobooks and or ebooks? Or is it just print specifically?
Actually, that can be typically in Germany, Media Control is providing the market data for printed copies, but also for digital and audio. So at the beginning, we were providing this with no regard to the format, but then in production, they have preferred to have a focus first on the printed copies. But actually, from a system perspective, that's going to be more or less the same. It's just like the sales data that we're gonna leverage won't be, in that case, even more specifically, the ones attached to the digital format or the audio format. But there is no reason, just technically speaking, if you feed the system, it won't be disturbed if you're talking about paper or digital. As long as you have the right figures in front of that, that should be really fine.
Well, we
The
are at
question is
time.
just, yeah.
It is 2 o'clock, so we
Oh
are
yeah.
starting to lose
Oh,
some
sorry.
folks.
Time is running out.
I just have one question left that I want to
Yeah.
ask very quickly, and then we can let these fine folks go. So, last question. How does your AI help with supply chain becoming more nimble and responsive to market demands?
Can you just rephrase it? More numbers? What, humble or nimble?
So demands, we all know demand changes rapidly. It goes up for a few days and then it drops. We have a relatively long supply lead time from weeks to months. sometimes POs already with the printer and then demand drops. So how does this AI help with not the interpretation of the data, but actually adapting to the fast pace of change within the supply chain?
Yeah. This is something which is, I won't pretend that this is pretty easy and obvious, and that in every single scenario situation, no problem, you're going to have a 100% correct response from any system. But the bottom line is that um, as long as an input, you can feed the system with this very detailed and granular historical data about the different purchase order coming from any level of your retail channels. And if you pay attention and look after precisely on the sellout data, how all of that is evolving, if you have something happening, and then the system will anticipate and make the correlation between the fact that there could be an increase and acceleration in terms of sellout, and you know that in the past the system will have identified that this kind of distributor, that could be, I don't know, Ingram or Amazon or whatever, and depending on the quantity they have pre-ordered, you should anticipate that they will certainly go for an additional PO. Because at any time there was an acceleration there, then they were asking a little bit more, as long as a first typically purchase order, they were below a certain threshold. So what we're going to ask as a system is to detect this kind of pattern. So as long as you come into something more or less similar, then the system should be capable. The risk is that this is something never seen in the past, and there is something really, really big happening, and which is completely disturbing the overall supply chain. And maybe in that case, neither the expert or the system will be capable to really effectively support you. But I would bet that it's going to be a very useful support and help you to at least detect that something is happening, make a recommendation, and then still rely also combining the expertise from the human and the machine to come to the best decision possible. I don't know
Well,
if
Mark,
it's really addressing and responding to the question, which is a kind of tricky one, but
it is.
Yeah.
But thank you for your efforts at it. I think that is still very helpful. I want to thank you, Mark, for this fabulous presentation, for engaging with us today. Brian, thank you so much for helping draw Mark out on some of those points and just really